In the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. This then is what I pray, kneeling before the Father, from whom every family, whether spiritual or natural, takes its name. Out of his infinite glory may he give you the power through his Spirit for your hidden self to grow strong, so that Christ may live in your hearts through faith. And then, planted in love and built on love, you will with all the saints have strength to grasp the breadth and the length, the height and the depth, until knowing the love of Christ which is beyond all knowledge, you are filled with the utter fullness of God. Glory be to him whose power working in us can do infinitely more than we can ask or imagine. Glory be to him from generation to generation in the Church and in Christ Jesus forever and ever. Amen. Mary, Queen of Carmel,
pray for us.
Saint Teresa,
Pray for us.
Saint John of the Cross,
Pray for us.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I contacted John Ransom this morning to double check what this weekend's topic was, because I gave him two topics last year and I wasn't sure which one was coming up first. And I said to him, it must have been a fit of madness that I chose this topic. But it seemed to me a good idea last year in about July. Little did I know what was going to happen in the meantime. And it's almost as if God contrived to have me here giving this weekend retreat in the present moment. Be that as it may, that's God. So I'm happy to push on with what it is. I suppose to begin with, in my own diocese, I've been disturbed by a number of things. First of all, by the people that I know and I've met that have been abused. And I meet people who are abused not simply within the context of the Church, but in other institutions. And where the abuse is in other institutions, as a bishop, I'm able to do something to help them. Because within the Catholic institution, they won't come to someone like me for help. They only come for compensation. And for me, compensation's the easy issue. It's not a difficult thing to find what you can do to help someone. And so I would have had dealings with people who were abused outside my diocese, outside the Church. And what has become very clear to me as I go around the schools, the heartbreaking thing that I'm aware of is that the bulk of child sexual abuse is domestic. And that's even more heartbreaking. And for me as a bishop to think that for me the only issue is something for which the Church in its watch failed is in fact hypocritical. Because if what we have is, and it clearly is, a blight on our society, but it's a blight on the whole human race. It is a perennial issue, which now we all know about. I knew virtually nothing about this until 2 years ago when I became a bishop. Yes, I knew about it because I had people coming to see me as a Carmelite that I worked with for years. And slowly, there was the beginning of healing. But I didn't know the extent of it and that, except now as a consequence of the Royal Commission and as a bishop, knowing so many things. But to begin, before we talk about it, this is not simply a church matter. This is, for me to think of it only as a church matter means I'm only concerned because somehow the Church has failed. And that's not what Jesus wants of me. The gospel is there, and the demands of the gospel are for the whole of humanity. And everyone's talking about, you need to do that. Fine. But for me, one of the big issues in terms of the abused is, how do I get to help all the others? I think we're doing a lot to ensure it will never happen in the Church again, but never is an impossible thing to say. But we should be doing things to ensure that it never happens ever again anywhere in Australia. because domestically it's happening right now. You know, it's kind of the context of it, as I know as a bishop, is awful. And those of you who know me know that this has bothered me deeply. And for me, my concern is not simply an ecclesial concern, but the care in terms of this that's happening for the people in the Lismore diocese. Whether you're Catholic or not doesn't matter, these are children. And it is happening now. Please God, it's not happening within many institutional contexts because of the Royal Commission. Please God, it's not happening within the church. But I know it's happening in families because I've seen kids at schools. It's happening in our schools. And in some parts of Australia, you could guess 1 in 4 kids is being abused somehow at home. Physically, emotionally, sexually. And where it's a good demographic, it might be 1 in 10. But it should be 1 in nothing. You know, this is what's appeared for us even before we go on to look at it. The immensity of it is great. And what it's asking of the church, as any human issue is asked of the church, is get out there for the people, is what I say to the bishops. And in my own diocese, in my diocese, I have the responsibility to find some way. At the moment, I'm just exploring and doing small things. But the issue is not, it is a church issue, yes. But if we only think of it as a church issue, we miss the point. Because it's much bigger. And to think of it only as a church issue means that, as usual, the church institution is being selfish because only thinking of their own problem. It's not our own problem. It's what's been uncovered is enormous. So in my own diocese, as I look at the situation, there are the people that, yes, the abused. There's no question but that we should be doing something, that we're not simply in terms of, for me, I said to the New South Wales bishops yesterday, I'm extending my view of this. It is not about what has happened within the church's watch alone, because that's not going to solve any problem. It's just going to make us look good again. And I don't care what we look like. I don't care whether anyone respects me. That's got nothing to do with the gospel. It's that something's happening in our country. So I even have people coming to me who were abused outside the Catholic Church. You're more likely, as a bishop, I'm more likely to meet them in a constructive way than those within the church. And there has been some assistance, but that's little. But there's that aspect. The other aspect which has become very clear to me is my people, the Catholics in my diocese, my priests, who are all absolutely shattered, confused, distressed, and my heart breaks when I look at them. Every one of my priests. Because I could stand and say, as far as I know, every one of my priests is a fine man. All the active ones, they're the ones I know. Extraordinarily good men. And the people that come to Mass on Sundays, my heart breaks when I look at them. Because they are, as the Gospel says, like sheep without a shepherd. And for a man who is known to be a very reluctant bishop, doesn't look upon himself as a leader, because I'm not a leader. All of this has made it very clear to me that I must be a shepherd, at least in my own diocese. But here, because I'm giving it here, this extends to Australia. Because it's not simply my priests that are lost, distressed, and want to give up. It's not simply my people that are distressed and wonder why they come to Mass on Sunday, would want to give up. It's also the bishops of Australia who, if they had their chance, would get up and go away, because all these bishops, most of them, are recent appointments. None of us have done anything wrong, and they would want to get up and run away too. This is the context of the church at the moment. Whatever you're feeling, rest assured your priests are feeling, and so are the bishops, except maybe this bishop, because I have a different context. I'm a discalced Carmelite, and for me, I have a different way to approach everything. And I'm probably the only New South Wales bishop at that meeting yesterday who's not overawed. Maybe because I've got no heart, I don't know, but it's because I'm a Carmelite, so I have a different way. And that's what I want to do this weekend, is to share with you, as I'm doing in my own diocese, giving talks and going around to the places and trying to help people walk this difficult path. But let's begin by saying that what happened is indefensible, and therefore cannot and should not be defended. I think it's quite wrong to in any way, even though you could say something which would mitigate what happened is so heinous and wrong that it is wrong to try to defend. And I'll come back to that tomorrow, because we have good precedent for not defending. But it's wrong to try to defend, because that's not what the gospel's asking of us. Okay? Defense is what should not be done. There are other things which need to be done, which will unravel by Sunday with us. But it's fair enough to say that let's simply say this first, I think, which might be helpful. Within our Carmelite tradition, and this is what I was taught, and anyone who knew Father Hilary, is what he said to me for his 90th birthday. I remember saying to Hilary when he was 90 years old, don't mind if I take my ring off, I'm not used to wearing a ring. I said to him, Father Hilary, what's it like now that you're 90 years old and you've been a priest for 65 years and a Carmelite for 70 years? He got to being a priest for 70 years and a Carmelite for 75 years, and he said, it's only getting harder. It's only getting darker. And I'm desperately looking for Jesus in everything. Interesting. And now that I think back on him, I think to myself, what a great Carmelite this man was. Because at the core of the Carmelite tradition is a simple stanza of a poem which reads like this. Where have you hidden, beloved, and left me longing? You fled like the stag after wounding me. I went out calling you when you were gone. Because at the heart of the Christian life is the soul that is always looking for God. If you think you have God, you've lost your way. Because God's always more. And the whole of the Christian life is spent searching for God. Even though you might be very close to God, there's more. And you keep looking. And dark times are an essential component of an authentic prayer life. Because darkness makes it possible to see the light. When there are many lights, you will not see the light of Christ. When there is darkness, this is what we're going to look at. The gift of darkness is, if I know what to do, I will see God. I have no hesitation to say that, because that's the experience of my own life. Darkness is the gift of God. I look at my priests, they are in darkness. So I've called them together in a few weeks' time for the Chrism Mass. We're to meet at 3 o'clock. Because for the afternoon, I'm going to listen to them and I'm going to guide them. Because how can they guide the people if I don't guide them? I'm doing the same thing with my people. And I look at my people, they are lost. They don't know why they come to Mass, but they're all there. In the cathedral in the last 2 years, the Sunday Mass attendance has not gone down, it's gone up by 60%. And George Pell's conviction and sentencing hasn't changed the numbers coming to Mass. I don't think even by one. I think even more are coming. The odd thing is I'm getting so many letters of support. I've only had 3 negatives, and I've arranged to meet everyone that's written to me. Because I have to care for them. That letter's coming from struggle. This is where we are now, and no doubt you are struggling too. And I want to begin because I want to give you some information this evening, and then open it for you to talk. Even though it's in silence, sometimes the best thing you can do is to say something or hear someone else saying something. But the challenge for us at this time is to ask a simple question, which is the question which always must be asked. Where is God in the midst of this? Where is Jesus Christ in the midst of it? I've been at meetings of Australian bishops now, 1, 2, 3, 4. My 5th one is coming up in May, and I'm in commissions and that. I think, sometimes, I said to Archbishop Fisher yesterday afternoon, he burst out laughing. I said, when I was a child, my grandmother taught me, if you think something stupid, don't say it, and no one will know. And I think, obviously, not every bishop had a Chinese grandmother. But they're very good men, nevertheless. But I've said to them, and they're desperately trying, all of them, what can we do? And I've said over and over again, you're asking the wrong question. What can we do means we've got a problem. We do have a problem. But it's a problem that what's done is done and cannot be undone, Macbeth. But I'll tell you what we've done in a moment, and you can tell me what more we should do, because you'll be surprised at what the church has done, in spite of what the press and people are saying. But I say to the bishops, you will never know what to do until you can find God now. Because until you can see God, you will not do God's will, except by mistake at the best. Always the challenge is, where is God, that I may go and meet you, Lord? And when I meet you, what I do will be what you want me to do, not what I've decided to do. Because what we've got is not a problem, what we've got is people. I'm a bishop and I'm dealing with problematic people all the time, but I keep telling myself, this is not a problem. This is a person. And I must go and meet this person. Because if I don't, I'm not being a shepherd. Because if I don't, I'm dealing with a problem. And that's the thing. Society deals, politicians deal with problems. Church, because it's easier, will try to deal with the problem. Because something has to be done. No, be patient, wait. Because when you can find God, you will know what to do. But if you can't find God, then you must find the way to find God first. Because we are people of faith. This is not an administrative problem. This is not an administrative issue. This is people. And people, likeness of God. I must find God first. You just look at the Gospels. This is a wicked generation that's looking for a sign. And the only sign that we'll have is the sign of the prophet Jonah. Jesus said to the people, You are a wicked generation because you are looking for answers. The only answer you'll be given is me. And the only answer we can have is to find him. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's what we have to launch into, in particular tomorrow morning. And for me as a Carmelite, even though it's awful, for me it motivates me to move to God. Which for most others in the church, it motivates them to want to give up God. But it's no. Because dark times should produce holiness. And where's that holiness produced? You. Huh? Dark times produce holiness. And the darker the time, the more profound the holiness. I believe that. Absolutely. So let me go, and I'll put that to one side because that's partly where we're going. So that if you can find Christ, you can go and play your part in this moment. Because when we say it's the church's issue, that means it's ours. If the church is not me, the church is us. It's what I've said to my priests. This is not I am your bishop. That means I belong to you. You are not mine. I belong to you because this church of Lismore is not mine, it's ours. I was dropped into it. I don't belong here. I have a role that God has given me to play, but it's not my church. And one day I could be taken and dropped anywhere else. And so but I've said that to the people too. This is not my church. You don't look to me for the solution, but you look to me for guidance so that we can do it together. That's what the Second Vatican Council wanted. It's not to put in place an abstract ideal of what the laity is. That's why it's never worked. But it's basically to say, it's us. In fact, I would say fundamentally without distinction between religious lay people, the clergy, the bishop, it's us. It's ours. And if it's ours, we must all take our place in this. So let's have a look so that I'll give you a sense, because I've asked people to come in and see me and say, tell me what I should do. And they come in and see me. Then they say things, well, let me tell you what we're doing already, and they go silent. Tell me, what else can I do? And they say, we don't know, Bishop. Well, I said, I will call together a committee. We all sit down and try to work out things. Because it's not my problem, it's our challenge. That's that sense, and that's what I think other bishops have to realise. Because we love the church, because it is us. But let's look and see what's happened. The administrative things have been done, I think. Let's look at the administrative things. I couldn't come and do anything in that chapel over there except with the permission of the Chancery of the Diocese of Wollongong. Even though I used to be in this diocese, even though I'm a friend of the bishop, even that they all know me, even though I'm a bishop, I have to send in documentation to them before I come here, which shows that the government has authorised me to work with children, that there's nothing against me in a police check, and that there's nothing further's come up. And this goes for any Catholic priest or anyone within the Catholic Church that does any work anywhere. And many people are saying it's gone too far. I don't think it's gone too far. I prefer it to have gone too far so that no one can say to me, you're being lax. I can't. And within our schools and places, there are all these things. Within my diocese, I've got a safeguarding officer who checks things. And in fact, the interesting thing is if there's any sexual abuse in the Catholic Church at the moment, it's child against child. That's because of all the stuff they watch. It's not adult on child. It's child against child. But all these things are in place. We have now got in place something so that, because there's no body outside the church that does it, we are implementing it ourselves as church, that every few years a group will come along and audit the diocese to make sure that all the things we say we are doing, and they're being done properly. That all the books are being kept properly, that all the checks and things are being done. If a priest cannot get a clearance from the government, he may not celebrate Mass publicly in the diocese, even though he belongs in the diocese. If an accusation is made against a priest, immediately the ombudsman is notified and the police are notified. And very likely he'll be stood down. The problem with that is he'll lose his good name even though he's innocent. It's gone the other way, because 30 years ago an accusation made against a cleric, no one will believe it. Now an accusation made against a cleric, no one will believe he's innocent. It's swung the other way. Oh, that's the times. I can't change that. In terms of the formation of priests, what I do is my seminarians go for a 5-day psychological assessment. That is high-powered. They arrive on Monday, they finish on Friday. They're put through all these things. And when they come back, if there's anything in the report, I go through it with them. And if there's a problem, they'll go back again. Until I've got clearance psychologically that there's nothing problematic here. And even in spite of that, in my diocese, before they become deacons, they would do up to a year's pastoral. And as deacons, they will spend at least 6 months in a pastoral placement, so that I can go to that parish, not ask for written documentation, but talk to significant parishioners who've been watching and look them in the eye and say, tell me. And they'll all say good things, and I look them in the eye and say, have you got any concerns? And if they do, I see it in their eyes. And if there is a concern, I won't ordain him, because I'm ordaining this man for you. At least in the Lismore diocese, it's not easy to get ordination, because for me to ordain someone is an act of conscience. And I'm ordaining this young man for the people. In my diocese, I'm now trying to involve women more. Not because it's politically correct, but because I think without doing that, there's grotesque imbalance. You know, just in terms of thinking. It's not about what it looks like. That's how the politicians think about it. It needs to look like this. I don't care, I just want the best people. But without the female voice, there is imbalance. So in terms of the plenary council, in my diocese, it's all being run by women, because they were the best people I could think of. There are so many things which the church is putting in place. And when someone comes in my diocese and makes a claim, I always say to them, if there is a possibility that this is true, fall over backwards to help them. We don't go to court. We will do our best to care for you. And if in fact you have been abused and we've paid you compensation, forever and a day, if you've got any counselling, medical bills, send them to me and I'll pay for them. Because if you've been abused, you might be able to manage the compensation. And you must always have the care. And I know that it doesn't matter what I do, I will not be able to reverse what's happened to you. But for me, the big issue is the whole thing about now is about justice, which they think is about compensation. For me, the real issue is healing. And there's precious little of that happening. Because I'm not trying to address a justice issue, but a person. And no one is thinking about the healing of this person out there at the moment. After the lawyers have done their bit and these things have happened, that's the end of it. But healing's important because a person has to live a life. For me, that's a bigger issue. And again, that's a church issue. Unfortunately, where it happened within the church, we're not going to be the ones who do the healing. So in my diocese, there is a little group that has community work and that, and I'm in fact supporting them financially. And they're helping mainly people who are in fact abused in families. But I have to find a way to extend this to other parts of the diocese. It shouldn't be the church that does it, but there should be groups that are set up, and it's right for the church to support them. Because it's not simply justice, it's healing. Because healing's about the person. Compensation's about the issue. Okay? I think differently to other bishops. There are these things. So these are just to give you some idea of what's happening. And if you could tell me anything more that we should do, we'll do it. But in many ways, I would put my head out and say the Catholic Church is probably one of the safest places for children right now. Which is a nice thing to say, but it doesn't. In fact, it's not a defence. It doesn't take back what was done, because in fact the authorities didn't act as they should have. There's no question about that. And there's no point to defend or deny it. It's a fact. There were so many failures. But we must now simply stand where we are and find the way forward, regardless of what. But as I sit before you now, the first thing which is on my mind is, how are you? Because every one of you is suffering. I was speaking to Aloysius, and Aloysius was at home with his father, who was 99. So Al will live a long time. Al's father's a saint. Everyone knows that. Al's nephew came in and said to Aloysius, "Uncle Wishes, what do you think about George Pell?" And the grandfather spoke up and said, with his eyes closed, this is what I would expect Mr. Rigo to say: "Why are we concerned about the sins of others rather than our own?" and I looked at Aloysius and I said, "That's what you would have expected your father to say, isn't it?" And that's we just closed his eyes and said that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't think about things, but that's an example of an extraordinarily holy man for whom, if this man's done this, he's done it. But it's not my concern. My concern is my sins. This old 99-year-old. But I'll pause to see, got any questions, or more to the point? Do you want to share what's burdening you, or ask the questions which you need to ask? Because sometimes it's good to listen to each other, because I'm sure you will find that we are all in the same place. So over to you for the moment.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned a few moments ago that you have brought women into your diocese in terms of leadership and leading the Plenary Council. Did you actually share that information yesterday with the other bishops across New South Wales by any chance? Did they actually know that this is what you're doing?
Well, in fact, the person from the bishop's perspective who is in charge of what's happening in terms of the plenary is Lana Turner, a girl, a lady. Fine woman. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. It's probably a follow-up from that comment. When you said that, and I think it's wonderful, but I do think for a long time women have been leading lots of things in the church.
Yes.
However, when it comes to decision making, we haven't got a big role.
Yes.
And so with the Plenary Council, I know women are doing these things in many places, but when it comes to the actual decision making at the end, how many women will be there?
The goal will be that the council itself, when it's formed, will be made up of a good distribution. And amongst the lay people, my sense is to be an equal number of women will be the goal that the bishops will have. Now the sad thing is the plenary can make decisions, but unfortunately critical decisions can have to be approved by Rome. Which is why I wonder what will come of it, because I've got no authority in many things. I've got authority in my own diocese only. Just as the Archbishop of Sydney has authority in the Archdiocese of Sydney only. So the bishops, their authority is restricted to their diocese. It's strictly circumscribed, and other things have to go to Rome. Yes, and
that's I suppose that's the concern, isn't it? And you shared it yourself. The other thing you said, which you said, I think differently to the other bishops. And that worries me, because
I think differently because my fundamental way of thinking is my only interest as a Carmelite is God.
Yeah.
And so for me the question, where is God, is a new question for many of them, because God is there for them, but for me as a Carmelite it's the only thing I'm interested in. That's because of my training.
Yeah.
And thanks be to God that everyone's on a Carmelite, because imagine what the world would be like. You'd have blackouts and no one would know what to do. And you don't need people like me. A few of us is quite enough. 18 to 35-year-olds. I've got a monthly meeting which happens in Lismore and is beamed out to 5 regional centres in the diocese, so that when I actually go to those centres I can meet the young adults. Because you can only reach those who want to come and listen, and those that want to come to listen, I've got a formation program. In the schools, I have been to every class in every primary school, and I intend to try to do that every year, to sit down and talk to the kids on the basis of what I know are the issues of what kindergarten kids have got, what grade 4 kids have got. And hopefully in every school, every year 11 and 12 student, because they're my schools. I have to be there, I have to understand where my kids are, I have to listen to them, I have to talk to them, they have to know me. But in order to get to them, the first thing I'm doing, in fact, is I'm giving retreats this year on 2 weekends so that every school principal can get there. All my school principals come on retreat for a weekend, so they listen to me, I listen to them, we get to know each other, because I have to start on the one-to-one level. The RE coordinators have all been to things with me. I'm getting to meet my school principals, I know them all by name almost now, and by the end of this year I will have had a meal with every one of them. Why? I'm a Carmelite. The only way to be there for the people is personally, one-to-one. And that's in terms of the schools and the young people. I have to get in there. You just have to pray that I can find the time, but it's the only way to do it. You can't do it by sending out letters. You can only do it by, as I said to the school kids, when you see me walking down the street, come and say hello to me, and they do. Because then I'm your bishop. If you see me walking up to Woolies to do my shopping, oh, come and say hello to me. That means I'm their bishop. If they look at me and say, there's the bishop, but don't feel they can come and say hello to me, I'm not your bishop. So, there's a whole, as I said to the bishops yesterday, and I said to Aloysius, and the penny dropped for him, we were chatting today, we always talk. The whole thing which is spoken about is clericism. Everyone criticises clericism, but I challenge you to tell me what it is. And I said to the bishops, I'll tell you what it is. Your job is bishop, but it's not who you are. You must live and do things on the basis of who you are, not what you are. Because the what you are is bishop, but that's not who you are. And if you are who you are, you will melt the people who criticise you. Because who you are, if you are a man of prayer, is Christ. But what you are is just a job. It's the same kind of thing. What are you? I'm a husband. No, you're Louis as a party, not a husband. What are you? I'm a father. No, you're not. You're this person. And until you recognise that this person is where God is, that's clericism. You call it what it will. It exists in society. I'm the Prime Minister. No, you're not. You're ScoMo. That's what it comes down to. And that's the wonderful thing we're seeing in Francis. He's Francis, who happens to be the Pope. And that's what clericism is. But when you recognise that, it's all throughout life. It's everywhere in the world. It's not simply about the church.
It's everything.
People identify with, but it's not who they are. Why? Because people are not comfortable and happy and content in who they are. That's why never make a man a bishop until he's comfortable in his own skin. So otherwise it'll always be the role. Yes.
Bishop, despite your concerns about politicians, we look at what happened in New Zealand and we see...
Oh, she's marvellous, isn't she?
A woman
yes.
who's not a religious woman and show this incredible care and compassion
the
and
fact
go
that
out...
she wears the scarf
and go out to
Muslims.
people. So, but I do want to ask you this question. It's very easy for us to sit here and talk about where is God, but to get that message out there as to how to handle this problem, that we need to find God in this challenge, not problem, in this challenge, is very hard for your brother bishops to do in a world where the media and governments have to react.
Yes,
and I want to make that point. So I'd like to ask you, how do we get that message out there? Why aren't you out there? I know you probably shy away, but why can't you all be out there saying that?
Well, I'm out there in my own diocese.
In your own diocese, but in the media, it's very difficult because...
Let me tell you what's happened in the media recently. I had a cup of coffee the other day with the main interviewer in the local radio station, who, we're becoming friends. And but the man who's a journalist, who in fact wrote an open letter to the bishop in the local newspaper.
Bishop, can I just ask if you could bring the microphone a little bit closer? Sorry,
Maybe God doesn't want you to hear what I'm saying. But, I said I'm happy to do an interview with you anytime, only because I'm starting to realise that I do have a role of leadership, but I have to have a relationship with you as the journalist, because I'm not being interviewed by a journalist, I'm being interviewed by a person. And you are interviewing a person. And I'm slowly getting this in place. Because when this is in place, you can then speak. And that's what needs to be done too. That extraordinary thing is where it's as Cardinal Newman said, cor loquitur. Engagement is one heart speaking to another heart. It's hard, but the leaders in the church, I think we have no other way of operating. But it's the same for you. You're all leaders. Your spouses, your parents, your whatever, and you're dealing with people. So yes, and well, it depends. I mean, if you're in Sydney or Melbourne, you have a hostile press, which is very clear. In my country diocese, I don't have a hostile press. I was put in the local newspaper last year as kind of, they're looking at the important people. I was put down as one of the important people, and thinking to myself, how did I get into this? I thought, I hope next year I go down in the ladder. I certainly don't want to go up. But kind of in a country diocese, people take you as you are, for who you are rather than what you are. Whereas in a big city, you in fact are a what. And that's where the bishops be careful not to operate from the what. But in a big city, I don't think they want to know who you are. Whereas in the country, You know, you walk down the street, people talk to you, people get out of the car and talk to you, people cross the road and talk to you.
Are you able to meet or interview your students individually?
I give them a retreat too. My students, yes. I know them well. They come to my house and I cook for them. They have to do the dishes, of course. Because until I know you personally, I'm not going to ordain you. I will not take the word of a rector. The rector says there's a problem, but the student, I get to know them personally.
I mean the students in the school.
On the schools, well, slowly, because there are so many of them. But as time goes on, you in fact recognise some of them, and you can talk to them, and they're delighted when you walk down the street and you remember their name.
So I find where I am in Sutherlandshire, we're very provincial there, that the students for school will talk.
Yes.
But they grow up so quickly that you don't recognise them.
Yes, but we must form them. Do you want to say how you're feeling about what's happened? How it weighs on you? Because it's often a good thing to do. Because we don't have prayer at 9:15, because today, every few months, the community has an outing day. Today's the outing day, so they're all out. Well, they're there, but they're all staying in their rooms, pretending they're not there. And Aloysius said to me, "Do you want? I'll call them out." No, it's like, it's a special. Don't call them out in their rooms because there's a retreat. I'll let them.
What's on my mind is the well, I can sort of imagine you can cope with this. I mean, Pell's conviction, although there's a lot of ambiguity or oddness about the whole business there.
I'm not going to go into the Pell matter publicly because there's an ongoing appeal, and it's wrong for a bishop to speak publicly about it. I've got my own thoughts, which is fair enough.
Yes, but it was a shock, of course, for everyone. Having a conviction, we haven't had that sort of thing before. But my concern is that how it affects the seminarians and the young priests who would have been would have come to the seminary during Pell's time and have shared a number of his ways of doing things and his theological approach to things. I was at the seminary on Wednesday. It was Manly Day. All got together, but it wasn't time. I would have asked the rector, Danny Marr, but I mean there was such a big crowd there. The students, the seminarians, were very, very friendly.
From what I've heard, they're all struggling, just as everyone else is. Anyone who loves the church will struggle when something happens to the church, because we belong to the one body. So if you get a nail in your foot, the whole body is affected. But strangely, even though all this is happening, the numbers in the seminary are up. But yes, I mean it would be around us in their own way. The priests, the young priests, the seminarians, all of you, we're all hurt by it all. You wouldn't be here if you weren't in some way hurt, or kind of, maybe not hurt, but kind of distressed and worried, or don't know how to think. So anyone else? You know, this is a period that the church is in. But it's not the Pope or the bishops, it's God. And so it will go on, because I believe this is the body of Christ. And no doubt about it, for me it's not an intellectual thing, it's an experiential realization that this is the body of Christ. How do I know that as a bishop? Because after 2 years, when something happens to one of my priests, my heart is affected. When something happens to my people, my heart is. I've only been there for 2 years. But I have a role in the body of Christ, and it's becoming part of who I am. I didn't decide that I wanted that, it's just happening. So the body of Christ. But that's a good point. Anyone else? Peter?
I guess Bishop Greg, I just feel enormously frustrated. Because I just want the world to experience the love of Jesus Christ. That's what I want the world to experience. And all this stuff just gets in the way, and it's just what is a difficult process anyway in the world that we're in, for any number of reasons. All this stuff just clouds and makes that even harder, and that to me is a big frustration. I can only love so many people in my circle. I can't, get beyond that, and it's just enormously frustrating.
And I keep asking, what about these victims? Because that, and even just the way that the victims are ostracised in the press, and Catholics say, well, that person has to be lying. There's three people that know the truth: God, the victim, and the person that's been accused. And I think we just have to stop actually persecuting these people any more than they've been persecuted, because I just see them broken, and that for me is the part with my faith that I am struggling so hard to go back to Mass when that's the message I get when I go to church. It's very hard to accept that. And that's why I've come, because I need to find a way that I can still feel that I want to be a Catholic today.
See, the question I ask you, where is God? God is in the victim.
Yeah.
And that remains a given. God is in the perpetrator, and that remains a given.
And
God is in us, and that remains a given. And we can't go forward without recognising that. Now the question, of course, is, in all these things, we need to learn what we should do and what we can do. That certainly is the case. I can think of one victim who's probably dead now, who used to come here. I won't go into the story, but it's the most horrific story I've ever heard. And the abuser was the father. And I still pray for that person, but I think as we don't see that person, the person's probably gone to God. Because what is lost can never be restored. And amongst other things, in my own diocese, what I'm trying to do is to put something in place to help some kids in such a way that they won't end up on drugs or in jail. Because, the thing is, what can you do? Resources are limited. In my diocese, I'm trying to work out a way to provide community housing at low cost for, these will be single parent families, but in such a way that there are other families there, so that there's a normality for them, so that some kids won't end up on drugs or in jail. If I can work, you've got any ideas, tell me, but I'll probably start on this in about a year's time. But I need to get it right, that it might work. Because if it does work, I will try to roll it out in almost every town in my diocese. But it's only going to affect about 10 little families. But it's, you can't not do something because of the enormity of the problem.
It may actually affect more families than you realise.
But as for the jails, it's hard, because it's hard for us to get into them even these days. It's very hard to get in. You can't just go along anymore. The whole thing's changed. But if you've got any ideas, if you think of them after the weekend, write to me. Because I have no idea. But thank you for what you said. It's very good. Thank you. Anyone else? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Yes?
Listening to you gives me a great heart. Bishop Homeming, it gives me a great heart to think that we have, and while you don't call yourself a leader, and I understand why you don't, many of us would see you as a leader, if nothing else but for the strength in your humility.
Oh my goodness.
And that
You-
unity, I
you-
think, well,
You're
perhaps
speaking
even-
to a
perhaps
very
even
proud
to
man. Ask Richard, he knows.
I think for me, I have grave concerns, and like many other people, I have a hollowed out core in me, as I'm sure we all do. But on the last day of the Royal Commission, the last day, after all the bishops were interviewed as a panel, a bishop that will remain nameless sat in my office and said to me, "Thank goodness that's behind us." Now, to this day, I cannot believe that your brother bishops are anywhere near as far advanced in their understanding, their compassion, their humility, to be able to see what all of us in this room have seen for many, many years, I would say decades. And that was a profound moment for me, and I thought, I belong in a different church.
No, you don't.
I belong, and perhaps, I actually think I belong in a different church. I was told I was doctrinally wrong as a result of that, but I struggle. Having heard what you say, I think perhaps the ACBC has a glimmer of hope. Maybe this is one star in the night.
Oh dear, I
sky.
hope not. I hope you're wrong. I
I mean,
don't.
my fear is that perhaps there is one star in the night sky.
I hope you're wrong.
And I think he's in this room with us. But what hope do we have as Catholics who are trying to work in our communities, trying to explain this to our neighbours, to our children who are saying, what does our church stand for if it has permitted this? And when you hear a bishop say, thank goodness that's behind us. And my response to him was, it hasn't even started. What can we do?
We'll talk about that tomorrow.
It is indeed difficult because even at work in the lunchroom, when you turn on the TVs, all the areas, and then people will really say, these people should be put in the jail, and you know they're so angry, and I don't even know what to say to them, you know.
But the answer is those who have been found guilty are in jail.
Yeah, that's what we say.
And but it's not simply the Catholic Church. All the people who've been found guilty of institutional abuse, and it's all coming out now, rightfully are in jail. That's correct.
Unfortunately, those that covered it up are not yet.
Yeah. I think many of those that covered it up are dead.
One of the things that has become clear to me, I work as a pastoral carer at Royal Shore Hospital. I work for Catholic care. And the day that the news broke, I was with a patient, an elderly gentleman, late 70s. And he advised me he had been an altar server, and we spoke, and I spoke about how my 4 children at different stages in their lives have been altar servers, and we spoke. But I found when I came away, the news broke as I was with them in the Burns unit. I found on self-reflection I couldn't go anymore to visit any more patients. I thought, no, I'm not in a good enough place now to see any more patients. And I made my way back to the chaplaincy office at Royal Shore. And our coordinator, who's Presbyterian, he looked at me and I said, have you heard the news? And he said, yes. And then he started to share news, a story about his life at another time and shared brokenness. And I've known him for 6 years, and he has never shared at such a level. Then the following week, the Anglican chaplain came and shared, the Jewish community came, the Muslim community came, and I'm finding that there's this shared brokenness. It has opened up, really broken open, the brokenness that we as people live, that we as people experience. But I've had this gift, this privilege of hearing brokenness from other, you mentioned the church, from other denominations, and it is becoming a shared brokenness. And yes, I just felt it was right to share this.
Thank you, Louise. And it's a shared human brokenness.
Indeed.
kind of, heaven forbid that the church will ever go back to a position where it thought that it wasn't broken. We always knew we were, but I don't know that people believe that. But it's, in fact, it's a human brokenness. It's everywhere in society. Both St. John of the Cross and Therese of Lisieux, because Therese, of course, is one of the great followers of John of the Cross, say, never be surprised or scandalized by another's sin, nor be surprised at the goodness of another person, because that's human nature. Both of the great saints said that. Because if you expect nothing, you'll always be delighted and surprised, yes.
But we know abuse, as you said, is in every walk. Unfortunately, it has been in every walk of life. And I hate to think that it's probably not going to stop forever. But I do think because the church, I don't know how to put this, because the church has I suppose priests have been up there on a pedestal for many, many centuries, and we've got to take them down. I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, but you said a while ago, you are who you are, you're not your role. Now that has got to change in the church.
Well, it has to start with you.
Oh yes, I know, I'm not saying it hasn't,
Yes.
I've always felt very strongly about it.
Yes.
Like, I don't use my title. When I introduce myself, I say my Christian name.
And
That's a little thing, but to me, and that's why over the years in the church, children have been abused because these people had positions of trust, or they could never do anything wrong, and somehow we've got to. I mean, there are great men out there, and there are terrific people out there, but we've got to somehow. We all have to. We are all equal in God's eyes. We have a particular job to do wherever we are, but we are all the same, and we are all the church, and we're all equal. And that we've got to spread that, get that out there somehow. And what you were saying tonight is exactly what you're doing. You are who you are. You're not the bishop of Lismore. You're Greg.
Because when you look at the gospel, he didn't walk around Israel as the Son of God.
Yes.
He walked
Jesus
around
Christ.
as Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
I was saying that to one of the friars. I said, no, we follow someone who is the Son of God, who is God, but he didn't walk around as God.
Yeah.
He didn't walk around, and it wasn't a disguise, but it's who he was. But it's hard to be who you are. First of all, because you don't know who you are, and you can be afraid of who you are. Which is why that's why we have to come to prayer eventually, because the context that I've given you just points us in a direction. That's all it does, which we'll begin to look at tomorrow, and I'll be asking difficult questions too, difficult spiritual questions. So I'll leave you with two, but you can keep on asking me questions and talking. But the first one I asked you was, where is God? Where is Jesus Christ in this? And the reason that that's important is nothing that's happened could have happened if God didn't allow it. It's a very challenging thing. It's what a Carmelite will always say. Well, God didn't do that, but it wouldn't have happened if he didn't allow it. And one thing that a discalced Carmelite has in common with a Muslim is Allah Akbar. God is great. And God is great means God is greater than anything that's happening. That means there is an aspect to all of this which is greater than the destructive components that we see. I mean, that's what hope is. Hope is the ability to recognize in a tragedy life. It's the ability to recognize in what happened in Christchurch a week ago the hand of God. Not that God did it, but God allowed it. And if God allowed it, it behoves us to find God there, to bring God forward from it. Because that's the story of human history. This tragedy is not the first tragedy in human history. and without wanting to minimise, because what we have here is inexcusable and indefensible, but worse things have happened in world history. And as in the back row there are two people who used to be in my youth group, now they're quite old, means I'm quite old, Richard and Peter in the back there, as I said to them as kids, if you're going to sin, two things. Make sure you enjoy yourself. They all would laugh, but the funny thing is no one enjoys sin. It's the peculiar thing. I'm quite sure no one enjoyed abusing anybody. No one enjoys wrongdoing. But the second thing is if you do something wrong, learn from it. And then you will draw God from it. This is a dreadful moment for us. Because it's so dreadful, we can draw God from it in an enormous way. Not simply but for the church, but for the whole world. That on one level is the first challenge. That's why the challenge is for us to find God. Because if you can't find God, we won't be able to bring Christ out of it. In which case all of this is a dead end, and it is evil. It is evil. But my faith says there is no evil or wrongdoing which will overcome the love and goodness of God. That's my belief. That's why I continue as a bishop, because that's my job. That's the first question. Where's God? Where do you find God in the midst of this? Not where do we go from here? That's for further on. Or what's the answer to this? Or what should I do? Or what should I say? No, the answer is not what should I say to my kids or to other people. The answer is where's God for me here? Otherwise you've got nothing to say but apologetics, excuses and theology, which helps nobody. It's a waste of time. There's the two down the back there. No, I'm totally against apologetics, which is that thing the church had, was tried to have things to say to prove that you're right. If you're right, you don't need to prove it. Yeah. The truth speaks for itself. And if you have to argue it, it could well not be true. You know, kind of the truth speaks for itself. But the second question that I want to give you, or is that enough for a question? No, the second question I want to give you is, why are you still here? Because that's real to where you are. I don't belong in this church, someone just said. Well, why are you here? It is perhaps the most important personal question you can ask. I've come along because it might help me. Why do you want to be helped?
So,
yeah, ask the question. Why do you want to be helped? Why do you want to have anything to do with the church? It is an important question, because unless you ask that question, you won't be able to see yourself. As I've said to my people, what are you doing here at Mass? What are you doing here? Why haven't you gone away? That's an important question to ask before tomorrow. Both of those things are worthy of prayer. Why am I here? Why? Where's God in this? Because in fact, in many ways, they're the only real questions that you can ask, because the only ones that concern you. If the question is, what should the church do? It's not even my question, because I'm not the church. It is an arrogant thing for me to think that I'm the church. Good grief, we're in trouble. But there are some questions that I can ask of myself, because they're pertinent and relevant. Until I have an answer to them, I'm only theorising. Can't go anywhere. Now, it's a question like people used to come and ask me when I was just a little priest here, and still little, and come and say, should I get married? Now they want to talk about, theoretically, have you got a girlfriend? No. Well, why are you asking me this question? What a stupid thing to ask me. Or she'll come along and say, should I marry him? Do you love him? I don't think so. Well, what are you asking me that question for? These stupid questions which are all theoretical. We have to ask real questions, because most people are asking theoretical questions and they won't help anyone, because they've got nothing to do with you. They're in the realm of ideas, and you think about them and you'll stay in the realm of ideas and you won't find God. You'll find God where you are. That's why the questions must be about you. Any other thoughts or questions? I'll give you all headaches. Does it make any sense? Anything? Do you want to share anything else? This is because other than this kind of we're going into things, but if you want to share how you feel, it's fine, because it can help in a safe space to share how you feel, because it's probably the same as everyone else.
I think listening to you, it just, I actually feel quite angry, because I think my experience is so foreign to yours. Like the idea that there's somebody in my diocese who cares about what happens to me, or has any idea of what's going on in my heart, and would know whether I was bruised, or is a completely foreign, not even in my parish, let alone my... So it's like, you know, that all sounds nice, but it sounds so far-fetched. I can't relate to it.
You mightn't be able to relate to it in me, but that is who Jesus Christ is. That is who Jesus is. And if you can find him, the anger will dissipate immediately. Because I can only help a few people. In my diocese, my heart goes out. For me, within 7 months, my problem was, quite simply, my heart isn't big enough to do what I meant to do. I knew that. But there's another way. Kind of, my first sense was, I can't do what I used to do one-on-one, because it's my heart and my capacity is not big enough. But that doesn't mean that that's the end of the story. And maybe one of the solutions is we have to all be caring for each other. That's what I said to the people in the cathedral the other day. I'm carrying this, but I wonder whether we shouldn't be carrying it together, because we could do a lot if we carried it together. Which means that mutual care for each other, which is community in reality then, rather than this whole sense of a notion of community. If the community comes together, sings songs and shakes hands and goes home. That's not, I don't want to be rude, but that's not community.
But isn't that why our church is a sort of empty? Because actually people experience better community at the football paths.
But do you know why? Because we've got too many people coming to our church. I say Mass in the cathedral, there are a few hundred people there. I can't talk to everyone, and some just go out the back door and go home. That's always been a problem with the Catholic Church. It always will be, is the numbers. More than 600,000 people go to Mass in Australia on Sunday. It's a lot of people. And when you've got a few hundred people coming to Mass, even if there are 2 priests, it's different to the local kind of... in Lismore, there are lots of little churches. One of them is the Potter's Church. I know them. They're lovely people. They've got about 15 there, so they all know each other. As I was saying to the administrator of the cathedral, you need to get very quickly, as soon as you can, a room in place so people come and have a cup of coffee after any Mass, so that those who want to can get to know each other. You can't make people get to know each other, but they can want to get to know each other. You always work not in a directive way, but with people's goodness. And goodness builds on goodness and establishes something of itself. Now, that's not my job, it's your job. Because for me it's impossible, it's too big for me.
But to be fair, a good parish community also requires a good pastor.
Yes.
Who can lead people, because we've seen our parish where we had a parish priest who then retired and another one came in, and it was a beautiful community. And then when that person was moved on and a new priest was brought in, it was a totally different community. Things that people held as valuable as part of our community the new pastor didn't want. So they were discarded. So the people feel as though their community is...
That's a sad truth. It is the truth. That's the way things happen. Which is why in my own diocese, the most stable, the most vibrant, the most wonderful parishes are ones that have had the same priest in one instance for 48 years and other ones for 15, 16, 18 years.
Yeah.
Because you've got a consistency. Because nobody likes change unless you don't like what's already there. And again, that's a problematic
The point
for us.
that you're saying is that
It's true.
the community, we're doing things, and one person comes in and has an idea and changes things.
Yes.
Without talking, or without
Yes.
listening to the community.
Even just
And that's
changing
where-
the mass times.
Yeah.
Because he didn't like saying mass at that particular time at night, so we lost our youth mass because the kids weren't all... I don't want to go to mass at 5 o'clock on Sunday night. We could go at 6 o'clock, which meant we could still play our sport, have our jobs, and our 6 o'clock mass was full. And so now they've gone to another parish.
I'll
that
give
offers
you a
6
gun
o'clock
and go
mass.
and shoot the man.
It's just very frustrating.
It's about leadership and how priests are trained and professions develop, which a lot of them
And
don't.
regardless of what training, an individual's an individual.
Yeah.
Some people are brittle by personality, others are controlling by... this is, and you have a parish council and parishioners doing things, and you've got the same problems too, because
Yeah, it's true.
we're dealing with people. Who was I talking to today? Kind of, it's wonderful. The problem is all the people, and that's what we have to deal with,
How do
unfortunately.
we, part of, I need to, I'm here, this is my first adult attempt at formation, and it's come at a good time in my life, you know.
You are an adult, I can see.
Absolutely, absolutely. The reason I say adult is distinct from when I was at school, which was the last retreat I ever had. And, you know, how do we, I'm here to help deepen my love for God and have God in my life at the forefront of that. And I'm here, there's other reasons I'm here too, but what is your view of how we form the laity to share in that being able to not just, you know, I don't like that word evangelise, but being able to help others to find when they within themselves are ready to help others and teach others how to find God.
Are you a patient lady?
I am a patient
Good.
lady.
We'll do that tomorrow. No, that's where we're going, in the hope that it will make a difference to other people. So yes.
Right now, I need it to make a difference to me first.
But it'll take about 2 talks to get there. You can't just jump there, because so many of the things I'm saying will be foreign to you
Yes,
first.
they are.
Gail.
Yeah, Greg, the reason I'm here is really to explore my own reactions. George Pell was not someone I cared for or admired ever, and yet when the sentence was announced that day, I experienced an indescribably deep sadness, and that I couldn't name. And it had nothing to do with him, but listening to you tonight, I think, well, where is God? God is there, I think, or I feel, in the darkness of that sadness.
Yes.
And I'm fortunate enough to be at the moment working with a wonderful parish priest who had the insight on that weekend to preach at every Mass. And it was a wonderful homily, and he also made himself available for people to come and talk to him afterwards. Very few did. You know, it's...
That's what happened in Lismore. I preached at every Mass in the cathedral and stood outside.
Yeah.
But kind of you couldn't help but be disturbed by the vitriol thrown at that man who walked silently into the court.
That's right.
Because this is Australia.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what you might dislike someone, you mightn't agree. but that vitriol was coming from a deep-seated anger.
Hurt.
And that's what's coming out.
Yes.
Now, do they mean that?
Yes.
I'm not going to make the decision that they do mean what they're doing. Because very often when things are so deep, the response is not voluntary. If I did it, it's voluntary. You could say, what a horrible man he is. But I don't know. As you say with these people who try to resolve what's happening in them through drugs and things, I don't know where they're coming from. I don't understand. But to see the vitriol was in Australia, in fact, was quite challenging. But I felt that I couldn't, as a consequence, in any way begin to judge or condemn the person, because I don't know. It's so complex. Because if this is taken from you as a child, nothing will replace the development that should have happened naturally. It's just not there, it's gone. And as I said, it's even worse if the abuse is within a family. Someone who was abused as a child will find it hard to trust anybody. Someone who was abused in a family will never be able to trust anybody. And there's nothing you can do, which is why the healing's so important. But to expect that they could, it's like saying, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. I mean, it's just bizarre to think that someone can. And the sadness is, I can't think of anything that I can do to help you. I wish that I could. And it makes prayer seem so empty, and that's my life. Before I became a bishop, my whole life was about prayer. Even what my life was about to me seems so empty as to be almost kind of hypocritical to say, to speak. Because my prayer doesn't have the power to heal somebody. So what can I do? But that can't paralyse us. Because to be paralysed is, we'll look at that tomorrow if you're patient. We'll start looking there. Anyone
I
else?
feel like I've been picked on.
You have to be very careful. The two down the back know very well that if once I know your name, I'll keep on referring to you and taking you as an example.
I think we can be kind to one another, and that's not just in the church. Through the plenary, through the plenary council process, I started to smile at people on the street and say good morning to people I didn't know. And mostly they smile back and say good morning. And I do it everywhere. It's kind of building community in a small way, and we can all do that. It's reaching out to other people. And in a big city like Sydney, we can, all ignore one another and sort of trample over one another like ants, so congested. But to really have eye contact with a stranger and smile at them and say good morning, they respond.
But do you know what the interesting thing is? I found it myself. When I do something which is not in accord with how I would like to do it, in fact it changes me. That's one of the few ways to change yourself. It's an extraordinary thing, which we will look at probably on Sunday. If I don't forget where I'm going.
Bishop Greg, just listening to you and also to the other comments, it really strikes me that there are at least two, there could well be more dimensions to the whole thing. One is a collective thing, and that immense vitriol and that outpouring of hate and everything else when the Cardinal George was sentenced. The day after that, an Anglican minister I got to be friends with rang him and said, I just went to sleep last night. He said it was just the most appalling just an outburst of hate. And I thought, well, yes, that's the experience of the victim sort of coming out. But there's also, to me, if you like, a sort of a negative compliment, if I can put it that way, on the position of the Catholic Church once was. If it would have been about, someone else in some other institution, people would have said, oh, terrible, he deserves what he gets. But it's like falling from a great height. The splash is very loud, very big. That's one aspect. Then there's the individual issue, the victim, and the situation of the victim. And the more I think about that, I've known three kinds of victims. One is the individual who is abused, although that's second hand. Another are certainly three priests and another deacon who are unjustly accused and whose life was absolute hell. For the 2 or 3 years where they've stood aside, all this accusation were aired, and even though there was nothing there, their lives were destroyed and remained so in lots of ways, because it's very difficult to recover from something like that. And also, this is again a bit second-hand. One of my relatives was involved in preparing the brief for a particular priest who had an appalling record of abuse, and just reading through the stuff going over a number of years, absolutely horrified her. And then she said, when he was in the Downing Centre, and in the Downing Centre, he was sitting there, waiting to be called up to a court, and there's a two-way mirror, and she saw this man who hadn't been a priest for a couple of years, sitting there with a crucifix, tears pouring down his face. So what's going on in that man's heart? That's things, the three individual aspects. I think all part of the issue as well.
I don't understand any of this, but I do know that life is a preparation for the next life. And if we think of life as limited to this life, nothing makes any sense. But life is a preparation for the next. And George Pell, whether he's guilty or not guilty, this is preparation for his next life. Because someone says he's guilty, he says he's not. So whether he is or he isn't, there's another aspect. And the correct response in him will prepare him as God wants to prepare him for his next life. That's always the given. And more to the point, as I've said to primary kids, I always say this when I talk to primary kids, when there are things inside you which are in fact destructive, don't you? Yeah, kids know that. Never allow destructive things to remain within you, I said. But allow things to remain in you which promote life and goodness. And that's your choice, I say to these primary kids. You must make the choice now. Because if you don't start making it now, when you get older, you might have no choice. And heaven forbid that we allow destruction within ourselves as the way of living. It's a thing we have to keep in mind now in terms of what's happening. It's not so simply something to think about or feel about, but make a choice, because the impact is on you. And I have no authority, I can't do anything there, but it is one of the greatest exercises of your own freedom. John of the Cross was big on that. What do you allow within yourself? Many things happen within me that you can't do much about, but do you hold on to the things? Do you leave them there? Because if you do, you'll destroy yourself. And in doing that, you will destroy others. We have a choice about ourselves, and we don't think, sadly, people don't think in those categories. But I, as a Carmelite, do. This is a choice that I have, because it's my choice about me. And I will not allow anyone to put something in me which determines me. I'm one of the few people that's never seen, that awful movie that came out about the crucifixion of Jesus. And people were saying, oh, it's so sacred, you should watch it. And I said, I will never watch it. Because I've been building up my own way of walking to Calvary with Jesus, and I will not let anyone into that sacred space to give me their images. It's my choice, and I still won't watch it. Because these are so crucial. What do you allow within yourself? And as I say to the kids, allow good things into yourself. Allow bad things in, and that determines you. Sometimes bad things go in, but don't hold on to them. Because once you do, you've lost your freedom. And for me as a Carmelite, the most important thing is my inner freedom to choose God. And I don't know where God is. I don't want to lose my freedom to choose God by having an imposition to choose something which is not God placed within me. There I do have some choice. And so be very careful in terms of what's happening within you. The human condition is such that we will hold on to things which will destroy us. That's your freedom. We're after 9 o'clock. I've been talking for more than 1.5 hours. Well, no, so you've been talking too. So I don't feel so bad. So is that okay? Go and sleep well. Place yourself in God's hands, and you will sleep well. And I'll see you tomorrow morning. I think 9:30 we start in here. Is it? 9 o'clock you're in the chapel with morning prayer. That's Sister Nori does that, because I'll be having my morning prayer with the community. Because otherwise I pray by myself. It's so nice to have someone to pray with. So I'll be see at 9:30. Thank you. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end. Amen. Father, Son, and